Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 30 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be, as the title says, all about audiobooks. Now, of course, audiobooks aren't new to those of us leading very busy lives and who love multitasking, especially those of us who get bored doing chores like washing the dishes. But did you know that audiobooks have been around since the 1930s, with some of the first test recordings stemming from parts of the Bible and even Shakespeare plays? And some other additional facts I wanted to share with you guys are as follows. So audiobooks were originally invented for the blind, but they can really help anyone with many literacy-related and other skills, including memory, pronunciation, reading accuracy, and critical thinking skills. In 1994, the Audio Publishers Association establishes the term audiobook, quote, as the industry standard. As per 2024, more than half of the US population over the age of 18 has now listened to an audiobook, which, if you're wondering, the population in 2024 would have been, I think, 340 million in total, meaning that 170 million have listened to an audiobook. In addition, the audiobook market is growing rapidly, with the global market expected to reach $39.1 billion by 2032. And finally, audiobooks can cost up to $5,000 to produce due to cost of sound editing and design, choice of self or hiring a professional narrator, as well as length of the book, to name a few. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm personally not an auditory learner, and I still very much need to read a physical or ebook to absorb the most information. But I have found more recently that simultaneously listening to the audio while reading either my physical or ebook actually has helped increase my reading speed, which is called immersion reading for those of you who don't know. And there's probably a few reasons why this works, but one of the main ones that I found is that it helps to reduce heavy, what is called subvocalization, which is basically where you silently say or vocalize words in your head as you're reading. And I used to honestly not realize the extent to which I was doing this until I started combining my audio and visual reading, which I only started doing last year. In addition, immersion reading is especially helpful for those of us who are neurodivergent, or just even those of us who have a bit more trouble with focusing and reading comprehension. However, for those who naturally read a bit faster, immersion reading might actually slow down your reading speed and can take you out of the story if you're naturally able to visualize what's happening in the story. And FYI, I looked across a few sources online, and it seems that the average reading speed in terms of words per minute is around 300, and slow is considered around 150 WPM, while fast can be 450 to 500 upwards WPM, depending on the source you're referencing. Now, I feel like I always say on the pod that I'm a, quote, slow reader. However, according to some reading speed tests that I took, I'm actually around the average speed, approximately 333 words per minute, the last time I checked. Honestly, since I tend to compare myself to a lot of other book content creators who all probably read around the 450 to 500 mark, I think to me it just feels like I'm a slow reader in that sense. But anyways, it's safe to say that immersion reading definitely has its benefits. I think the only downside to it is potentially cost and availability of resources, since it can require obtaining the physical or ebook and audiobook. Also, I believe Libby used to have the option of being able to download MP3 files for the audiobooks that you borrowed. However, with all things, they have since taken that feature away, and you can now only read audiobooks in their app, which honestly is a bit of a pain for most of us. And let's be honest, platforms like Audible and Spotify are a bit of a ripoff for those of us who are consuming a lot of books. So I guess that is something to keep in mind for those of you who do want to try immersion reading in the future. Now, another thing I will say is that one of my barriers for choosing not to read audiobooks in the past was often the choice of narrators. For the most part, audiobook narrators are fairly high quality nowadays, but there have been a few odd exceptions, and I kid you not, I soft DNF'd 7 Habits of Highly Effective People on audio a couple years ago because the author reading sounded like a literal robot, and I'm still very sorry to the author himself, Stephen R. Covey, but that was just my experience. However, I was curious to find out last year about dramatized and graphic audio, as well as what is the difference between the two. Now, if you're like me and have heard of neither, here are some of the slight differences according to what I found online. So, graphic audio is a specific brand and format known for its full cast of characters, narration, sound effects, music, and has an emphasis on cinematic experience. I think their tagline is literally, it should be like a movie in your mind. Whereas dramatized audio is a broader term for an audiobook that goes beyond a single narrator while also incorporating a full cast, sound effects, and music, again, and can be seen likewise to a radio play. And I guess another point I found while researching online is that some graphic audiobooks are abridged versions, so you're not going to get exactly the same book word for word compared to if you listened on regular audio. This might not bother some people, however, I did see a post on Reddit where there was a 5-hour difference between the graphic audio versus regular audiobook for a specific title, which I don't remember the name of now. But anyways, this means that a significant portion of the book was cut out and or changed. In addition, I've heard that certain titles can get a bit pricey on graphic audio, which does make sense given the amount of production going in. However, I will say I have seen some graphic audio titles pop up on my local library, so it's definitely worth a shot to check your local library as well and not have to break the bank for every audiobook out there if you really want to experience the graphic audio. I'm going to be honest. I've yet to listen to any dramatized or graphic audio myself, perhaps partly because I haven't been reading as much fantasy, which I feel like is one of the more popular genres for graphic audio. However, I'd love to hear any of your thoughts for those of you who have more experience with graphic audio or dramatized audiobooks. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. So the next point I want to talk about was audiobooks on Kindle versus Kobo e-readers, which I'm going to be honest, there aren't that many differences. But of course, this is something that wouldn't have been possible with the earlier e-reader models in general. But thanks to lots of recent technological advances, most of the newer models are Bluetooth enabled, and you're now able to purchase and read audiobooks directly on your Kindle or Kobo by connecting any Bluetooth headset or earbuds. And you can even purchase audiobooks directly from the store on your Kindle or Kobo. Except that, once again, I was looking all this up, and it appears only certain countries have Bluetooth-enabled Kindles. And of course, Canada is not on that list, which as always is upsetting to me, and I'm sure some of my listeners as well. And in fact, I think there are only a couple other countries besides the States that have Bluetooth-enabled e-readers. But one thing I will say, though, is that from the videos that I watched, it looks like you can only read either the ebook or the audiobook at one time on your e-reader, meaning you cannot do immersion reading with the Bluetooth enabled. Honestly, at least for Kindle, Sync, or previously what was known as Whisper Sync, is probably a better option for those of us who like immersion reading or at least want to be able to switch back and forth seamlessly between your Kindle ebook and Audible audiobook. Again, from what I've seen, it looks like this feature is available on all Kindle models, and you simply have to turn it on in your device settings. In addition, if you use the Kindle app on other devices like your mobile phone or desktop a lot, you can also turn on sync in your Amazon account so that it remembers across all your devices, which I feel like is also helpful if you tend to annotate a lot and whatnot. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a Kobo equivalent feature for syncing your audiobooks, as well as the sync feature is only going to work if you own all these books, meaning that it won't work with books from the library, which is why I don't really use it all that much. But all in all, it's still nice to know about all these newer features on e-readers and that reading is starting to become more accessible for all. So before we close out today's episode, I thought I'd leave you all with some of my recent favorite audiobooks. It's hard for me to say if I have any top favorites of all time, as I really don't listen to as many audiobooks compared to my regular reading, but I want to share some recommendations in case you're looking to dive more into audiobooks this year. And I'm honestly going in no particular order here, and I'm sorry to say that, unfortunately, I have no fantasy recs at the moment. Hopefully that will be rectified soon though. But with that, let's start off with actually none other than Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. So, unfortunately, because I binge read this book quite quickly, I actually didn't get to listen to the full audiobook, and I only listened to a few chapters in the very middle of the book. But I can say that the chapters I did listen to on audio were amazing, and it was especially mesmerizing to hear their thoughts being read aloud. And maybe it's partly because I'm partial to the British accents. I will say, though, I personally found Magnolia's narrator hard to understand on 2x speed and had to pay closer attention to her speaking cadence for some reason, but I didn't struggle as much with BJ, which is odd because I've heard most people, it's the opposite way, and they struggle with the male narrators with this particular series. Now, I have heard that Daisy Hates also has separate narrators for each main character, so I'm hoping to pick this one up on audio as well once I finally get to that book. And then keep moving along the list, we have Daisy Jones and the Six by TJR. So this one I'm pretty sure is no surprise, especially as it's one of TJR's highly beloved titles for most of her fans. And I have to admit, I didn't enjoy this book when I initially tried to read it only as an ebook and found the interview style dry to read. Listening on audio really made the difference for me, as this one also has a whole cast of characters voicing each person, and I feel like the cast was well chosen overall in terms of their just voice tone and style that they had for each character. In addition, I believe you can get a bonus track of one of the songs in the story when you get the audiobook, which I think is always a cool feature for stories that incorporate music. Also, another note that I heard if you're a fan of Fleetwood Mac, you will really love this story, as the band is supposed to be loosely modeled after them. But yes, out of all of TGR's titles, because honestly, most of her titles actually do have great audiobooks, but this is the top one that I would recommend. And then the third book that I have on this list is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Now this one I'm recommending simply because the sound production and design was so realistic and amazing in terms of the podcast and Netflix documentary element of this story. This is honestly an audiobook where, like Daisy Jones, it could be seamlessly adapted into a movie or TV show, because of how well done this audiobook turned out. And they could honestly even take sound bites from the audiobook itself and put it in the show. But yes, some of the sound effects and bites were so cool in this audiobook, and definitely made for a better reading experience overall than if you were to only read this book. And now, the last two recommendations I have are both memoirs, which are read by the authors, which honestly is always 10 times more amazing. So starting with Crying in H-Mart by Michelle Zauner. Now, this is one that I remember being so popular back when it was released in 2021 and into 2022, I want to say, at least among the East Asian community. I think I read this book a bit later in 2023. However, this memoir still had a lot of impact on me. There's something about the way Michelle Zauner speaks, her vocal cadence and intonation that was calming, haunting, and hopeful all at the same time while recounting, all of these past memories. I think it truly makes a difference when the author reads their own memoir, as you can often feel more of the emotional impact since, again, they themselves are the ones who went through all of these experiences. And her story will truly resonate with you if you have ever experience things such as conflicting racial or ethnic identity, hard parental bonds, as well as forging your own personal identity. Or if you simply love memoirs that detail all different kinds of food, then yes, you're going to love this audiobook. And then the last one that I have on this list is Becoming by Michelle Obama. Now, I just gotta say for this one, Michelle Obama has one of the most exquisite narrating voices out of all the memoirs I have listened to. And this memoir itself was honestly great, assuming that she didn't use a ghostwriter, which I'm actually not sure she did now that I think about it, but I'm hoping she didn't, because this prior First Lady was honestly extremely talented and woman all her own. And you can tell that just from reading this book. I enjoy getting to hear about all the different stages and events of her life prior to and including the time of becoming the First Lady. She really has lived an incredible life, and you can clearly hear all the joy, pain, and humor in her voice as she narrates each part of her life story. And regardless of your political leanings, at least in my opinion, I feel like this is a memoir that anyone can enjoy, but especially on audio. And with that wraps up today's episode on All About Audiobooks. Hope you all especially enjoyed today's episode. I know I am no Julia Whalen when it comes to audio here on the podcast, but nonetheless, thank you for listening. I'd also be interested to hear whether you prefer reading or listening to audiobooks exclusively, and if you have any favorite audiobooks that you would recommend, whether you read them recently or not. Otherwise, as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here for episode 31. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.